welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 332, and today's date is April 4th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Economic War Has Begun, which will lead to World War III, because we need to take a look all around the world, and we have to understand what is going on. We understand that the United States right now is spread out all across the world. Why? To prop up the petrodollar, to keep the dollar alive long enough to start a war, because they realize that the economy is coming down. So they're in the Middle East, and they're trying as best they possibly can, the central bankers, U.S. government, with the armed forces, to keep the people in those countries back and to maintain the status quo in those countries and keep the puppet government in power and to keep the central bank and all their natural resources on the U.S. dollar. We see this in Africa. We see this in Middle East. They thought, let's go to Ukraine. We can create this coup d'etat. We'll spend $5 billion and we'll just take over Ukraine. We'll overthrow the government and we can prop up the system a little bit longer. Plus, it will give us a strategic location right near Russia and along the Black Sea. This kind of backfired, and they're not getting the Black Sea portion. They're not getting the entire country. They're getting the West. And again, this is what they've been trying to do to continually prop up the system. They thought they were going to go into Syria and Iran and push Russia out of there and place a central bank, a private Western central bank in these countries, remove the government, replace them with a puppet government, and put all their resources on the U.S. dollar to continually prop up the dollar. And how does this prop up the dollar? Well, that means more and more countries need to keep the dollar in reserves to buy these natural resources. If right now, let's say they're going to purchase from Syria or Iran, they don't need U.S. dollars, so they don't have to hold as much. This is the entire point of what they are trying to do. And when I say they, it's the central bankers, U.S. government. Now, what have they done since to push their economic war forward? Because they see what's happening. They're losing the battle in Syria. They have these peace talks with Iran that aren't going to go anywhere, and they lost what they thought they were going to get in Ukraine. So they push these sanctions, which are absolutely ridiculous. They push these sanctions on individuals and some banks, which allowed Russia to say, you know what, if you're going to make this move, we're going to accelerate what we're going to do now. We're going to create our own payment system. We're going to put our oil on the ruble, and we're going to call it the petro ruble. We're going to back our currency with gold. Then we're going to go out there and make deals with other countries to completely bypass the dollar. And this is what we're seeing right now. And this is not a coincidence. This is something that they've been planning for. This is something that they needed to do because they understand they needed to provoke Russia and China, North Korea, India, Iran, and Syria to make a move to make deals with these countries. This allows the United States and the central bankers to start the economic war between the United States, the Euro, and Russia. And it is a battle of building up military assets on either side at this point. As of right now, NATO and the United States are now surrounding Russia. They already did the pivot to Asia, where they put all the the military assets out in the Pacific. They have 60% of the fleet out in the Pacific. They're in Japan, moving to a new location to enhance the base so they can bring in more sophisticated weapons. They're in the Philippines, and they're setting up everything right now. They're even bringing in new equipment for the missile shield, going from Poland all the way down to Romania. And this missile shield was really there always for Russia. It was never there for Iran. And they realize what is happening, and they're pushing this agenda forward because the recovery here in the United States is an illusion, and it's being held together by spit tape and whatever else they have just to keep it together. And they're throwing out a huge amount of different statistics, changing calculations, manipulating all the information, and we can see this happening right now. And right now we are in the economic war between the dollar, the ruble, and the yuan, and this will eventually lead to World War III. And of course we understand that Europe is completely in a recession/depression. They can spin the propaganda all they want. They can tell us they're coming out of recovery. They can say that everything's getting better and next year it's even going to be better than this year. They said that a year ago, 2 years ago, and look where they are today. All we're seeing is unemployment going up. We see the youth employment getting higher. More and more people are getting sick and tired of the governments lying to them. They're rising up and they're saying enough is enough. And if we go out to Cyprus right now, they're heading down the same exact path as Greece. And their unemployment numbers, even though they told us they were removing the capital controls, and I haven't seen any additional reports that they actually did it. They said it, doesn't mean they did it, and they said they were going to remove them, but I haven't heard of any other reports at this time. But what we're seeing in Cyprus is property prices are very low, real estate is not moving at all, and unemployment is reaching a record high. Right now in March, their unemployment has reached around 17% at this time, and again, it's continually going up and up and up. And all that happened there was they had a bail-in where they stole the people's money, then they had bailouts which they took on more debt. So again, people are out of work, their life savings are gone, and they're hoping that the economy will flourish after this. How? You got me. Look at Greece. They're trying to get their third bailout, and there are more and more problems there. People can't even, make ends meet. They're having a very rough time. More and more people are being laid off. Their unemployment is approaching 30%. The youth employment is somewhere between 61 and 63% at this time. It has gotten worse since that first bailout, and we're seeing this in every single country. Now, the corporate media here in the United States is out there saying, oh my God, the bad winter's over. We are going to see a landslide of jobs come in the spring. Well, you know what those jobs are going to be. First of all, there's no landslide of jobs. Second of all, these aren't high-paying full-time jobs. It's the same jobs that happen every single time spring hits. It's the spring-summer jobs where Home Depot and many other companies hire people to push spring products at this time. But most of them are part-time, and they're temporary. They will not hold out, just like during the Christmas season. Oh, look, everyone's hiring. Well, of course they are. It's the Christmas season. But right after the Christmas season, all those jobs disappear. And, the corporate media is trying to spin it that after this harsh winter, we are going to see so many jobs come in. It's going to be unbelievable. But what we're actually seeing is the opposite. And we always see the opposite of what they're telling us. Right now, women who are unemployed right now is over 180,000 more this March, and they have reached a new all-time high of 4.8 million unemployed women right now. So in February, it was 4.67 million. It increased to 4.85 million, and women are having a very tough time finding work at this time. Now, the payroll numbers came out, and March payroll missed their expectations. They expected 200,000 jobs. They got about 192,000, and the unemployment rate is staying steady at 6.7%. That real unemployment number, which is not real at all. It's completely manipulated. They don't count those people who are no longer looking for work. It's not because they can't look for work anymore. It's because there's no work out there. They haven't given up. They're continually trying. If they're sitting at home and sending out resumes on their computer, they don't count those people. If they haven't had an interview within the last 4 weeks or so, they don't count those people. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I know people who've been sending emails out and their resumes out using many different websites, and they haven't gotten responses to it. They haven't been on any of these interviews that they're talking about within the last 4 weeks, but they're still looking for jobs. They still want that job. They're receiving unemployment right now, but as we know, that's going to run out. But they're still looking. They haven't given up, but they are not counted. Now, in March, there are 27,000 more Americans unemployed in March, and now the labor The amount of people that are not in the labor force is hitting 91 million people. 91 million people not in the labor force. That brought the national labor force participation rate to 63.2% in March, up slightly from February's participation rate of 63.0%. And again, what are these jobs that they're talking about that everybody's getting? Well, if we really break it down, only 2,000 full-time high-wage jobs were added in March. That means those people who are trying to get a job making the same salary of $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, only 2,000 of those were added in March. The rest of the jobs were temp help, which were 29,000 jobs for temp help. Retail was 21,000. Leisure and hospitality was 29,000. Education and health, 34,000. So we can see where the people are, where they're working, and we can see that this is not a recovery. We have to remember, since the beginning of this year of 2014, we have had mass layoffs, and these people haven't even lost their job. They're still working. They'll probably get a severance payment, which will last them, and they'll go on unemployment. So they'll be fine for a little while, but they'll be out of work. Now, if all these financial institutions, Dell, Sony, and other manufacturers are laying off all these people, where are they going to go to get the same type of job? They're not. And what happens is these people go from these high-paying jobs to 1 to 2 to 3 part-time jobs. But they are counted as having a job, but they're not making the same salary. They might not have the benefits. And again, this is not building a strong recovery. This is completely imploding the economy as we continually do this. Now, J.P. Morgan has noticed that the market's forward PE ratio now is precisely 15.2 times the market, and it is exactly the same back in October 9th, 2007. And you know what happened at that time? The market came down. So we're seeing many different graphs right now that this imitates the 1929 stock market crash. If you looked at the graph, you could see the stock market of today, the one back in 1929. It looks pretty much very similar. We're seeing, and all these billionaires and everyone's calling out that this market is reaching the top. And what we're seeing is a lot of the insiders are starting to take their profits now. The same thing that's happening in real estate. They're taking their profits. And this is what everyone does right before the bubble comes down. And we are definitely going to see all of this come down, but it depends on how this is going to look. If they can get this war started with this event, they'll blame this on another country. And this is what they've been trying to do, because they understand what is coming. They understand that this market cannot be sustained. They understand that there are so many people out of work at this point. They understand that more companies are laying off, that real estate is imploding, and the big insiders now are betting against the market. So they realize what is happening, and this is why they have accelerated the process with the economic wars. They actually place sanctions on Russia, which aren't really sanctions on Russia. They're on individuals, but they're making the world and the people of the United States believe that there are sanctions on these countries. They are pushing these countries to make the next move. They're provoking, so they can get this next event to occur. Now, of course, our congressmen are out there, and they're saying, you know something? We don't get paid enough money. And there's a Democratic congressman who's making $174,000 a year, and he's barely getting by. He could just, maintain what he's doing right now. And this is Representative Jim Moran is taking up the cause of an underpaid members of Congress, saying that their six-figure salaries are insufficient to cover the cost of living in Washington. Well, then, you know what? Do what all the other people have to do at this point in time. Get a cheaper place, get a cheaper car, get a cheaper phone service, cut out cable. Didn't President Obama tell us to do this? That's what he should be doing. If he can't live on $174,000, there is a problem. And again, I put up a poll on the X22Report.com site, and if you haven't voted, just go to X22Report.com. It's right on the first page. It's a very simple question. You don't have to sign in or do anything like that. It's yes or no. Do you think the people in Congress deserve a pay raise? Yes or no? And so far, we've had about 186 people vote, and right now 99% say no, and 2 voted for yes, and that's 1% saying yes. So right now the majority is saying absolutely not. They do not deserve a pay raise. If he can't make it on 174,000, he needs to start looking at what he's paying for, where he's living, what car he's driving. I'm sure there's plenty of cuts that we can make that he can stay and live, because I'm going to tell you right now, I have a family of 6 and I make a lot less than that, and I can support my entire family on the much lower than that. So if I can do it, he can do it. And the rest of them can do it. Okay, now, I've talked about Obamacare, and I've talked about climate change, and I said they were pushing climate change. Of course, they changed it from climate warming to climate change because it made no sense, because the entire world was cold. So how could you say, you know, there's climate warming? So they had to change it to climate change. And of course, the president has set up, you know, a fund for climate change. They're creating this website. And I said all of this is because they need to raise more revenue. And this is what governments do. They look around, they see what they can do, and they see what they can blame on the people to make them feel guilty. And if they can get that guilt up and that fear up enough, they can have them pay into something. They can convince them that it's the right thing to do. And this is what they're actually doing with climate change, because what they need is they need more revenue into the government, because there's just not enough people working. They don't have the revenue to sustain what is going on. They are spending way too much money. The debt is escalating and increasing at exponential rate that they don't know what else to do except continually tax people. And we see this happening in Spain, we see it in Italy, we see it in France, and of course the United States is going across the ocean with FACTA, looking for everyone that they possibly can find that is making an income that has a U.S. passport, and they like to tax them. And this is why people are turning in their passports, because they're saying this is ridiculous. They're making deals with different banks to find out who has money in different banks and all around the country, because that money needs to be taxed. And now they're turning toward climate change, because Obamacare was a complete disaster, and they didn't bring in the revenue they thought it was going to bring in. Actually, more than half the people aren't even paying for it, because, again, we have to remember, most of the people aren't making a good living. They had great jobs. Now they can't find jobs, or they're making part-time jobs. They're just making ends meet. Their credit is ruined because of 2008. What happened there, 38% of their wealth is gone. They lost their house in foreclosure or short sale, and they're just trying to get back on their feet. And the last thing they're thinking about is spending money on health care if they really don't need it. And they rather take the hit with this small tax, because the amount of money that they're making really won't really affect them at this point in time. And the administration realized this, and this is why a couple months ago they've been pushing climate change. And now all of a sudden we're seeing what is happening with climate change. Just like we thought, they're pushing the taxes, and they're starting in California. Beginning this month, millions of Californians will see something new on their electricity bill. It's called a climate credit. This line item, credit, will range between $30 and $40. It will function as most Californians' first direct experience with the AB 32, the Global Warming Solutions Act. So we can see what is happening right now. We can see where they're pushing this. We understand what is going on. The entire country will be hit with many different taxes on the energy you use, because they need to raise the revenue. This will eventually be a federal tax. It will be on every single person's energy bill, and everyone will be paying, because they need to bring in the revenue to keep and maintain their status quo, because they will never cut spending. And all these cuts and everything they're talking about aren't real cuts. They're pushing the money to different locations. I didn't see them cut anything with the $1 billion they sent to Ukraine. I don't see them cutting anything that they're sending over to Iraq, Lebanon, Libya, South Africa. They're sending billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. And here in the United States, hey, we don't have any money, but we need to tax all of you to pay for all these things that we're doing for the central bankers, because they're making oodles of money, and we need to keep them happy and continually making them oodles of money, or it looks like we're going to be heading to war because this dollar is coming down, but let's just keep it going for a little while longer so we can put all of you people into war to protect the way we like it. And this is exactly what is happening, and this is what we're seeing. Now, we understand that President Obama was out there telling us that, he's going to revamp NSA and he's going to make it better. And, of course, everything they always say is always the opposite. They told us that the metadata means nothing. It doesn't really track you. Well, of course it does. We don't really, record your phone calls. Well, of course they do. We're not really spying on the American people. Well, of course they are. All of this is completely always the opposite of what they tell us. They are compulsive liars. Every single one of them continually lies, 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 and this is all they do. And right now, as they're trying to reform the NSA, it looks like they'll be collecting more information from the people, more recordings of telephone conversations, and they're keeping it for a longer period of time. And we knew this was going to happen. They need to keep track of every single person. This is all lip service. This is all this is. And there's a survey out there saying that nearly half of Americans are claiming that they're changing their ways due to the NSA spying right now, where a lot of people are not writing or putting it in email anymore, personal or private things. They're not putting personal or private things on Facebook. They're keeping it very light. They're not really tweeting as much as they were. If it is, it's about ridiculous things that mean absolutely nothing. And people are saying that they're completely changing their ways because they're a little nervous about the government spying on them all the time. And we have to remember why they're spying. They are putting together social profiles of every single person. I don't care if you are saying, like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, it shouldn't even matter. Well, let me ask you this. You're not doing something wrong, but you come up with this fantastic idea and you want to patent it. And all of a sudden, you go to the patent office, and a day before, someone patented the idea before you. Or you have this investment idea, and you speak to someone else or your financial advisor, and all of a sudden, someone is stealing your investment idea, or something happens, or you are talking to someone that you have no knowledge that they belong to a certain organization, and now you are lumped in to that organization to be rounded up later because you are associated with that person. So privacy is our right. Privacy is not dictated by the government. You have the right to be private in your home, in your personal effects, and this is why the Founding Fathers created the Fourth Amendment, where people couldn't just walk into your home, go through everything that you have, and try to put you in prison for what they have found. This is why they need a warrant. They have to go in front of a judge, plead their case with all the evidence that they have just to get the warrant to search your home or your personal effects or your digital media or anything that belongs to you. And again, people say, well, it's email, it's very different. No, the only difference is it's a different platform. A letter is put in an envelope and is sent through a mail service to a sorting area, put on a trunk, and sent somewhere else. An email is compiled on your computer, sent through wires, through different exchanges, and lands in a different area. It is exactly the same thing. The only difference is the delivery method, but it's still your personal information that they cannot spy on to get because it's against and completely null and void according to the Fourth Amendment. Okay, now we understand that the European nations are struggling. I mean, they're in a recession slash depression. Some countries are in a complete depression. And it looks like the people are like, enough is enough is enough. Riot police clash with protesters in Brussels. Belgium riot police have clashed with union workers protesting against austerity measures near the U.S. Embassy in Brussels, using water cannons to disperse the demonstrators. The clashes erupted on Friday as some of 25,000 people protested against austerity measures imposed across the European Union member states. And I mean, they're out there saying, and they're chanting, austerity is not working. Austerity is causing a mounting social and economic crisis. Over 26 million Europeans are jobless, and they're chanting over and over and over. They don't want the government to do any more of this. They want the government to fix this, but they really can't because the central bankers are behind this. The government is stuck where they are because the central bankers are forcing them to do this, because if they want more debt, they have to do what they say, and the government officials don't want to lose their power. They don't want to lose their pay, so they do what the central bankers want. And the only way to change things is to create and have peaceful protests, get more and more people until you have the majority of the people behind you, and then march into the government offices peacefully and take it over and say, enough is enough. We are starting over. We are done with this. And this is, some countries have done this, and other countries are now approaching this point. And we're seeing this also in Spain. They're screaming out, no more cuts. Thousands across Spain stage anti-government protests. Thousands of people in dozens of Spanish cities have taken to the streets to voice their discontent with harsh government policies and the EU's plan to further austerity cuts, which they claim are destroying their country. The residents in over 50 Spanish cities, including the capital Madrid, have taken part in the anti-government protest on Thursday, and people are waving banners saying, rise up European people, and no social cuts, no pensions of misery. And people are getting to this breaking point, and you're going to see more and more riots. Now, the U.S. is continually provoking China, provoking Russia, provoking North Korea, provoking anyone they possibly can, because they need to get this war started. And this is what you see before the actual war starts. And now, of course, the U.S. is warning China not to try a Crimea-style action in Asia. And the U.S. says that China should not doubt the U.S. commitment to defend its Asian allies, and the prospect of economic retaliation should also discourage Beijing from using force to pursue territorial claims in Asia the way Russia did with Crimea. Well, if I'm not mistaken, Russia and Crimea, they had a referendum. The people voted. Crimea decided to go with Russia. People's pensions are going up. They're giving tax break for businesses that want to come into Crimea, and they're building a pipeline, a gas pipeline, and a power station to come into Crimea to be independent of the Ukraine pipelines and energy sources. And the people are now Russian citizens, and things are going pretty well there. And the United States placed sanctions on a couple of Russian diplomats and a bank, maybe a couple other companies, but really, what did the United States actually do? Not much. So their threat, I don't really think this is that great of a threat to China at this point. Now, in Ukraine, about 8,000 former Ukrainian military have applied for Russian citizenship. Most of the Ukrainian military personnel serving in Crimea have chosen to stay on the peninsula and already applied for Russian citizenship. And we can see people, they gave them a choice. Listen, if you want to go back to Ukraine, take your weapon, go back, no big deal. We'll help you move your family. You can go to the Ukraine. If you like to stay here, no problem either. You'll join Russia. You'll become a citizen of Russia, and you'll serve under the Russian army. And we could see that most of the people have been choosing to stay in Crimea and to belong to Russia at this time. Now, Europe, they are looking at this and they say, well, if we decide to cut off supplies from Russia, gas prices in Europe are going to rise about 50%, and this might not be a good idea. I mentioned this in my other report, where they might have to take a shower and skip showers a couple times a week, And right now, if they decide that, you know what, we're going to cut off all natural gas supplies from Russia, they're going to see a increase in price from $380 dollars per 1,000 cubic meters to at least $550 dollars per 1,000 cubic meters. And if we look at the countries that are dependent on Russia right now, I mean, Poland, 79% dependent on Russia. Germany, 35% dependent. Austria, 71%. Italy, 28%. France, 15%. Finland, 100%. And, Romania, 86%. Greece, 59%. They're all dependent on Russia. So if they decide to say, okay, we're cutting Russian supply, they would be in very big trouble. And this is why the United States is out there saying, listen, you're going to have to find some alternative sources here, because you can't be dependent on Russia, especially if we're going to war. You can't do this. You're going to have to find something else at this time. Now, in the title of this report, where I'm saying that the economic war has begun, which will lead to World War III, we can see what is happening. The United States is pushing the other countries to do things at an accelerated rate. Obama now is visiting Saudi Arabia. And we understand that Saudi Arabia has deals with China, has deals with Russia at this point. And Obama's visit to Saudi Arabia, they were discussing options to punish Russia with sanctions for its behavior in Crimea. The first option was proposed by an American financier, George Soros. According to him, every day the U.S. could offer for sale 500 to 750 million barrels from its strategic resources, estimated at 700 million barrels, which should lead to the decrease in world oil prices by about $10 to $12 per barrel. Immediately after the formal reunification of Russia and Crimea, the Obama administration gave orders to sell 5 million barrels of oil from the SPR. This is the strategic resource area. And we saw that happen. They sold the fuel to see how this would work. However, after 2 weeks of discussion, U.S. analysts agreed that the effect of such actions will be short-lived, and squandering suitable strategic reserves of the country was not a good idea, because you never know what might happen. So that plan didn't work out too well, where they were trying to crush Russia because they sell a lot of oil. They were trying to bring down the prices and try to crush Russia economically. And then they went on to say he suggested adding a few million barrels from Saudi Arabia to the oil from the U.S. reserve and become oil prices are determined by profitability. The cheap oil in the range of 2 to 3 million barrels per day could significantly derail the price. Allegedly, Obama traveled to Saudi Arabia to discuss this option on March 28th. And the king called them unreliable because of the U.S. position in Syria, didn't want to deal with Obama, and he's upset about Iran with the peace deal, that they weren't backing the Syrian rebels in Syria, and the Saudi king kind of brushed him off and didn't go along with any of these types of plans. So we can see the economic wars are definitely on, and they're pushing the agenda. Now, Russia is going to back Iran in its nuclear talks, like they said they were going to do, and they're going to push for more things that Iran wants, and we're going to have to see how these nuclear talks go forward. And Russia is also pushing more military ties with Iran. That we understand that Russia has made a deal, a $20 billion deal with Iran to purchase their oil for goods or gold or rubles, not using the U.S. dollar. We understand Russia's made deals with China, India, North Korea, and now they're making a deal with military assets. And Iran may become Moscow's #1 choice in Russia's impending search for a reliable partner in global defense and security affairs amid worsening ties with the West, a Russian military expert said. He said that Moscow and Tehran should resume military cooperation if an expected agreement to lift international sanctions is reached during the forthcoming negotiations, and they would supply Iran with military equipment and assets which include missiles, planes, and anything else that they need. The same thing they're doing with Syria at this time. So we can see what is happening. We are now taking sides. The economic wars have started, and we can see that all of this is happening every single day, and it's escalating every single day, because right now China has spread across the globe, made deals, and I've reported this so many times before, and every time I report it, there's more deals they're making, more clearinghouses, more bilateral trade deals, the petro-yuan, the Russian petro-ruble, the ruble's backed by gold. Russia's making deals with all these countries, and all of these deals bypass the U.S. dollar. This is what we are seeing right now, and these are the economic wars which will eventually lead to World War III. And again, when I say this will lead to World War III, the United States will be backed into a corner. They won't have any other options. They will need to create some type of an event to take all eyes off the central banks and the governments, because they do not want to be blamed for this collapse. And they're trying to escalate this. They're trying to build the story of who's going to attack the United States, and they're continually doing this over and over and over. And as we know, they need to keep the dollar propped up so they can get this plan moving forward. So right now, American commandos across the globe are creating a new strategy to combat Al-Qaeda cells in other countries. Remember what I said? Libya, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, South Africa, everywhere you hear Al-Qaeda, it is the people rising up to take back their countries. We see it happening in Iraq. The United States just sent over the Apache helicopters. We see it in Libya. The people are rising up. They've taken back most of the country. They pushed the government out of the parliament building. They want to sell the oil not using the U.S. dollar, but of course U.S. forces step in and they retrieve the oil tanker and brought it back to Libya, because they will not let this happen. And right now they're setting up these special commandos to go and infiltrate all of these countries to keep the people back. They are trying everything they possibly can. This goes on to say the Pentagon is moving aggressively to establish a network of elite American commandos across the globe as part of its changing strategy to combat Al-Qaeda cells in places like North Africa and the Middle East. So we can see what's going on here. They need to maintain the dollar, the petrodollar, all across the world. They can't invade these countries again because they've already invaded them. How many times can you invade them? They already have the puppet government in place, but they need to push the agenda. They're using drones, and now they're left with sending in elite commandos into these countries. And of course, most of these countries are asking for international help, which opens the door for troops to move into these countries to help. Now, we are seeing, and we know that when this event occurs, there is going to be a cyber attack on the financial institution. And in my other reports going way back, I've mentioned that the NASDAQ, the stock exchange, the BATS, all seems to have certain glitches where all of a sudden they all shut down. For no apparent reason, no one can explain it. Well, it happened again. The BATS, NASDAQ decided to shut down. We don't know why. Is it a glitch? Is it something laying dormant? Are they testing the kill switches? It could be any one of these. And the reason for this is because they are getting ready for a cyber attack. Now, if they incorporated some type of malware into the system to help bring the systems down to make it look like it's someone else doing this, this might be causing havoc on the systems. It might interfere. It might bring the systems down, and they might have to hit the kill switches to stop it, and then the whole system is brought back to life. So we can see that they are definitely getting prepared to do something. We see this happen quite often, and this is all in preparation for the false flag event. Now, in the news, there was this ex-SEAL that was talking about the power grid. He was on with, he had an interview with Judge Janine, and he was saying that the electric grid will be very easy for anyone to take down. It wouldn't be that difficult to do, and he got shot. And they're saying the people that shot him were Al Qaeda. And I'm looking at this story and I'm saying, well, let me get this straight. You're talking about the power grid going down, how easy it would be to do, and he believes that it will come down, and all they need to do is shoot in a certain location, bring down the transformers, and the whole power grid comes down. And then all of a sudden, he got shot by Al Qaeda. This looks like this is propaganda, and I have nothing against the SEALs. They have my respect. All military personnel have my respect, but this seems to me as a propaganda setup to make people understand that it will be Al Qaeda that will bring down the power grid. We understand that they've been having drills, that there was a dry run in California, and people used AK-47s. They shot down at the transformers and they brought down the power grid in that region. We understand they've been practicing with cyber attacks, and this just seems another piece of information that goes along with, yes, we are bringing down the power grid. We just want to make sure you understand that it will be from Al Qaeda. And this is how this is looking to me. Now, the other day, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the Syrian, there was information intercepted that the Syrian opposition forces, these are the paid mercenaries, the rebels from the United States, were going to create this false flag event where they were going to launch a chemical attack and then blame it on Assad. And it looks like they actually did it. And I don't know if anyone's buying this, but it is another false flag attempt, and I said they're going to create many of these small ones, and they want to see if one of these will actually work. And we've seen the one in Turkey. We've seen this one now, where they allege attack on the neighborhood of Jobar in the capital of Damascus, and of course they intercepted the information, and now it's out there. I saw it on Reuters and some of the other corporate media stations to say that yes, it looks like Assad is using chemical weapons again, because CNN had intel that he was hiding chemical weapons. But we have to think here. The UN Security Council is in there removing chemical weapons. Assad has made a deal with Russia and the United States to remove the weapons. They've been removing it. The rebels have been stopping them from removing these chemical weapons. And all of a sudden, he's going to say, hey, you know what? I should use some chemical weapons now. The UN is here. We're removing half of my chemical weapons at this point. Now is the time to do this. It makes no sense. There's no motive behind it. But if we look at the paid mercenaries and the rebels who are losing, and Assad has been pushing them back, they have motive. They have motive because their motive and what they've been showing us is the same thing ever since they started this. They want Assad removed. The Geneva II talks, the agenda, remove Assad. War crimes against Assad couldn't be proved. The UN brought it up. The report was smuggled in to the UN by the United States. They had the humanitarian reason. They tried to say they needed humanitarian aid because of Assad's war crimes. Russia called the United States on it. That backfired. We had the Turkey false flag attack, or at least they tried to sneak military personnel from Turkey into Syria, to fire missiles from Syria into Turkey to make it look like Syria fired on Turkey. That failed. And then we had this chemical attack that they try to do again. So they have motive. They have the reason to do it. And we have to understand that the elections are coming up mid-July, and they can't let Assad be reelected at this point. So they are getting very desperate, and they will make a move, and that move will be an event here on the United States soil, because again, this will enable the United States to start war. This will enable the United States to bring Russia into this, to bring China into this, and everyone will be brought in to start World War III. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared.